Hey students, welcome back. This is Taurus, elbow bump. How are you? Are you okay? Is your family okay? Remember, if you need anything, please send me an email so that I can try to help in some way. So lucky you get to hear my voice for another lecture. But the best part is we will be continuing to interpret box plots and start to identify outliers. Yay! In the last chapter, we focused on measures of center. More specifically, we focused on mean, median, and mode. Measures of center tell us how the data is alike. This chapter, our concentration is measures of variability. And measures of variability tell us how the data is different. There's lots of types of measures of variability. We've already discussed some. One is the range, which is the difference between the maximum and the minimum. The other is the interquartile range. We also call this the IQR. And the IQR on a box plot is represented by the side of the box here. The purpose of the interquartile range is to identify the middle 50% of the values. In order to find the interquartile range, we actually use the 5-number summary. The minimum value, the lower quartile, the median, the upper quartile, and the maximum value. The interquartile range is the range between the upper quartile and the lower quartile, or another way to say that is the range of the upper quartile and the lower quartile. What we're going to discuss today is when a value can be categorized as an outlier. Let's do a little review at interpretation of box plots. Now remember, as we read this, continue to think to yourself, what am I learning about differences, right? Because the box plots are representing differences in the data. So this study has to do with T and the immune system. It says, participants of a study were randomized to drink 5 or 6 cups of either tea or coffee every day for 2 weeks. Both drinks have caffeine, but only tea has L-theanine. After 2 weeks, blood samples were exposed to an antigen, like some sort of germ, something foreign. And production of interferon gamma, immune system response, was measured. So they looked to see what this interferon gamma, how much of it was being produced by the blood sample as it reacted to this foreign body, like this germ or something that they put in the blood. Okay, and their idea was if the tea drinkers have higher levels of interferon gamma, right, the substance that shows that the body is reacting to this germ or this foreign body, there is some evidence that drinking tea may increase the immune response. Since this is a randomized experiment, it's possible to actually make a conclusion about its causality. Okay, we'll see. Okay, so then they gave us these box plots. This first box plot is describing the effect of the coffee, and this second box plot is describing the effect of the tea. Here they have the units of interferon gamma. Let's look at the coffee first. Okay, so let's see if we can find the 5-number summary. So the minimum value is about 0. The lower quartile is about 5. The median, I would estimate it would be about 15. The upper quartile is 20. The maximum is 40. And then it's got a dot out here. What's this dot? Okay, we're going to set that aside for a second. Here we have the information about the tea. The tea is about, 5. Maybe a little bit more. The minimum value for tea is about 5. The lower quartile for tea is about 15. The median for tea is about 45. The upper quartile for tea is about 50. And the maximum for tea is about 55. Okay. Looking at these two, I can see that this length, right, the height of the T box plot, the distance between the minimum and the maximum is longer than the difference between the minimum of the coffee and the maximum of the coffee. So there's more variability. The measures aren't concentrated in one particular place, where here they appear to be. It seems like there are a lot of values right in through here. So there is more variability, more differences in the reaction of people's blood samples when they're drinking tea to an antigen and their production of interferon gamma than there is with coffee. Okay, now let's talk about this particular point right here. This point right here is an outlier, and that's what we're going to discuss in a second. And we're going to discuss why it's important to identify outliers and how they can affect the data in general. So let's look at this box plot. This describes money that movies earned last year at the box office. Most movies are in through here, right? There's most movies that make anywhere from nothing to about $400 million. But then there's those movies that make a ton of money, right? There's a lot of them that hit pretty big, and then there's some that just completely blow it out of the park. Like everybody's going to go see those movies. If we wanted to do research about just general movie earnings in a year, it's kind of difficult to add these into the mix because they're really skewing the data. It's very unusual for somebody to earn $1.2 billion for a movie, during a particular year or ever. So you really have to think about, are you going to continue using these outliers? How is it going to affect your data? Do those outliers actually fit within the constraints that you've set for your population? And should they be included in your sample? The whole point of the outlier is to be able to identify values that may not be appropriate for your research. There's a very general rule that you can use to identify outliers. And basically it is that if a data value is more than 1.5 times the IQR beyond the third quartile or before the first quartile, then that should be considered an outlier. Super simple to calculate. The calculation involves using the IQR calculation, right? Or the range between the upper quartile and the lower quartile. You're going to multiply it by 1.5, and then you're going to compare where other values fall if you were to add that new calculated range, the IQR times 1.5, to the third quartile or subtract it from the lower quartile. Okay, so let's look at an example. So the first one we're going to do is look at this simple data set, and we want to know if there are any values that might be considered an outlier. So we're going to go ahead and look at that. Okay, and let me go ahead and go into Zite Board. Okay, so I've copied the YouTube view information here on my Zite Board. Let's count up how many values I have. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So my sample size is 15. I'm going to go ahead and do my 5-number summary. So my min, my lower quartile, my median, my upper quartile, and my max. My min is 3, my max is 220. My lower quartile, or let's do my median first. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. My median is 39 because that is exactly in the center. Now I need to find the number that is exactly in between here. So that is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. It's going to be 11 here. And on this side, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. It's going to be 61 here. Okay. And so let's see what's going on so far. So I want to find my interquartile range. So my interquartile range is going to be 61 minus 11. And 61 minus 11 is 50. And if you want, I will prove it to you by bringing up my Google calculator here. Boop. 61 minus 11 is 50. Okay, so I've got this. Now I'm going to multiply this by 1.5 because I want to know what numbers are going to be past 1.5 times my interquartile range. So I'm going to multiply it by 1.5 and I get 75. Okay, so my interquartile range, so I'm just going to put this over here. This is for outlier identification. My IQR times 1.5 is 75. All right, now I'm going to add 75. I'm going to put this right here. Okay, so I'm going to add 75 to my upper quartile. So my upper quartile plus 75. My upper quartile is 61 plus 75. And if I add 61 to 75, I get 136. Which means that anything greater than 136 here should be considered an outlier. Well, let's see where 136 would fall in through here. Well, it goes to 99 and then it goes all the way out to 220. So according to this, 220 should be considered an outlier. And the actual maximum should be considered 99. So if you're using the outlier, this should be 99. Same thing's going to happen down here. If I subtract 75 from 11, anything less than that is going to be an outlier. Well, if I subtract 75 from 11, I'm going to end up with a negative number, right? Let's clear this out. Clear. 11 minus 75 equals negative 64. I don't have any negative 64. The lowest number I have is 3. So 3 is not going to be considered an outlier. So if we were using this to identify outliers, then this would change to the next lower number, and 220 is an outlier. So according to this, 220 is an outlier. It's something that's so incredibly different that it does not have the same type of features or the same type of values that are typically seen within a data set. In the context of this particular problem, it means that really most of my views, right, are between 50% of my views are anywhere from 11 views per video to 61 views per video. 99 views per video is kind of the most I ever get. But then there must have been one video that everybody just really loved because that is an outlier. If I wanted to look at data regarding my videos or the features of my videos and how they're related to views, perhaps 220 is not the one that I kind of want to bring into the mix, or depending on what I'm looking for, maybe 220 is the only one that kind of fits the question of the research. So the point is that 220, my outlier, is really, really different than the typical variability that I would see within my data. So I really have to make some decisions about whether I want to use that value, how I'm going to use that value, why that value was different. I mean, it just requires me to kind of go into a deeper understanding of what's happening with that outlier before I can move forward. Certainly, this outlier is going to affect my mean, right? It's going to affect my measures of center because that outlier is so different that it's going to pull my mean upwards. And my mean is not going to fully describe my data values, my data set as a whole. So what's the big idea? The big idea is that the box and whisker plot, also called a box plot, displays data visually. And the box is the IQR. The whiskers describe the spread between the extreme values, the maximum and the minimum. It's important to identify outliers. Outliers are values that are very different than your data, the majority of your data, the typical spread of your data. So a value can be considered an outlier if it is less than 1.5 times the IQR from the first quartile, also known as the lower quartile, or more than 1.5 times the IQR from the third quartile. So that's it for today. With that said, don't forget to check your emails, check Blackboard, do your homework, and subscribe to this channel. Even better, hit that notification bell so you know when there are new videos for this course. Okay? This is your teacher, Taurus, saying stay safe, and I will be waiting to give you a virtual elbow bump in the next video. Ciao!